Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Wilmoth, and in this presentation I will walk through the ethical decision making model as it applies to the dilemma in my vignette. The dilemma occurs when a client struggling with addiction directly asks whether I have personally experienced addiction or recovery. And as a counselor in long term recovery myself, this question creates an ethical tension that requires careful and structured decision making. So, in step one, we want to identify the problem, and we want to identify all related concerns. So, the main problem is determining whether self disclosing my recovery history would benefit the client or potentially cause harm. The client's emotionally vulnerable, actively struggling in addiction, and seeking hope. My disclosure could build rapport, and it could normalize their experience, but it could also shift the focus away from the client and blur boundaries or create unrealistic expectations. Secondary problems include the risk of role confusion and the possibility of the client idealizing my recovery and the potential for the session to become counselor centered rather than client centered. This dilemma involves client welfare, boundaries, professionalism, and the counselor's use of self. Legally, I do have to follow the Virginia Board of Counseling regulations regarding professional conduct, and clinically, I must consider the client's trauma history, emotional stability, and treatment goals. Spiritually, I must ensure that my decision reflects integrity and stewardship of the counseling relationship. In step two, we want to apply the ACA standards and state codes. I do apply the ACA Code of Ethics and relevant state laws. Several ACA standards directly apply, which is A.1.A, which is client welfare. My primary responsibility is to promote the client's well-being. A.4.B, which is personal values. I must avoid imposing my personal experiences or beliefs. A.5.B, self-disclosure, where I must use self-disclosure cautiously and only when it benefits the client. Informed consent, which is A.2.A, includes transparency and clarity that are essential. Virginia's laws emphasize maintaining professional boundaries, avoiding harm, and practicing within the ethical standards, and these regulations reinforce need for caution and supervision when considering personal disclosure. Federal guidelines like HIPAA as I was saying, the federal guidelines like HIPAA remind me to protect client privacy and ensure that any disclosure does not compromise confidentiality or personal integrity. Moving on to step three is where we determine the nature and dimensions of the dilemma. I want to examine the moral principles and consult relevant literature and professionals. Moral principles involved include beneficence, promoting the client's well-being, and non-maleficence, avoiding harm; autonomy, supporting the client's right to make informed choices; and fidelity, maintaining trust and honesty. Recent literature supports cautious, intentional self-disclosure. Andriani, 2022, found that self-disclosure can increase client openness when it is brief and clearly connected to the client's goals. And UMAM, 2025, showed that structured interventions can enhance healthy disclosure and psychological well-being. Iverson, 2025, also emphasized that self-disclosure must remain client-focused and never meet the counselor's emotional needs. To ensure ethical practice, I would consult my supervisor, experienced LPCs, and the Practitioner's Guide for Ethical Decision Making. Consultation helps prevent blind spots and ensures that my decision is grounded in professional standards rather than personal emotion. Moving on to step four is when we generate potential courses of action. So I would list all the possible courses of action that I would take. Number one, do not self-disclose at all. Number two, provide limited clinically relevant self-disclosure. 3, share a detailed personal recovery story. 4, seek supervision first, then decide on limited disclosure. Or 5, avoid disclosure entirely, and remain strictly client-focused. Listing all these options ensures that I consider every possible direction before making a decision. Step 5 is when we analyze consequences of each option. So I would evaluate the consequences of each option that I listed. For no disclosure, the pros would be clear boundaries, avoids counselor focus, but the cons would be missed opportunity for connection or modeling hope. Option 2, limited disclosure. The pros would be building rapport and normalizing recovery, but the cons would be the risk of client over-identification or shifting focus. Option 3, which is detailed disclosure, would benefit and enhance strong connection, but the cons would be high risk of boundary issues and ethical violations. Option 4, which is supervision plus the limited disclosure, would support decision and it aligns with best. The cons would require time and coordination. Option 5, which is strictly client-focused, your pros would be keeping full focus on the client, but the cons may feel less relatable. This step helps eliminate options that could cause harm to the client. And moving on to step 5B, choose a course of action. I choose the most ethical course of action. I selected a combination of seeking supervision first and then using limited, clinically relevant self-disclosure only if it clearly benefits the client. This does align with the ACA standard A.5.B and is supported by research from Andriani 2022, UMAM 2025, and Iverson 2025, all of whom emphasize intentional client-centered disclosure. This approach protects the client, maintains boundaries, and ensures my decision is grounded in ethical practice. Step 6 is when we evaluate the chosen course of action. So I would evaluate the chosen action using 3 tests. The first one is justice. I would treat any client in a similar situation the same way. The second is publicity. I would feel comfortable explaining this decision to a supervisor or ethics board. And the third is universality. I would recommend this approach to other counselors facing similar dilemmas. So no ethical dilemmas remain because the decision is supervised, client-focused, and grounded in ACA standards. Step 7 is when we implement the decision. I outline how I will implement the decision by first consulting with my supervisor, reviewing the ACA standards and Virginia regulations, 3, documenting the consultation and rationale, 4, provide brief, clinically relevant disclosure only if appropriate, and 5, monitor the client's response, as well as 6, continue supervision and ethical reflection. This step ensures the decision is carried out ethically and consistently. So I do want to thank you for viewing my ethical decision-making model presentation. This case highlights the importance of thoughtful, supervised decision-making and the need to prioritize client welfare above all else. And I do appreciate your time.